They took my money and said I should be grateful I was still breathing. That's how the young man at the counter put it. "You'll be dead before this even kicks in," he laughed, then turned to his colleague. "We should be charging rent just for standing in line." My name was Martha Danvers. I was 78, and I stood there with a receipt in my hand for a medication they refused to give me. It was a small pharmacy, tucked between a nail salon and a dry cleaner just 3 blocks from my home. The kind of place that used to know your name and how your husband liked his cough drops. It had changed hands recently, I heard. Now it was all glass counters and fake smiles. But I still believed in the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the boy was having a bad day. Maybe I was. "I paid for it this morning," I said, not raising my voice. I handed over the printed confirmation from my bank, showing the transaction. "It's for Eliquis. My prescription hasn't changed." The boy, barely older than my granddaughter, glanced at the screen, then shrugged. "Yeah, well, the shipment's in the back. Not unpacked yet. Come back Monday." "It's Thursday." He didn't look up. "I heard you the first time." The woman behind me shifted her weight and exhaled loudly. Someone further back muttered something about these people always holding up the line. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the counter, the boy, the sterile plastic bag with my name on it, sitting just behind the glass. It was within reach, but not mine. "Could I at least get a refund then?" I asked. The boy scoffed. "Refunds are for returns. You didn't get anything to return." I felt the heat crawl up my neck, not from shame, not even anger, just the slow pressure of being erased in real time. "Then I'd like to speak to the manager." "That's me," he said, and grinned. "Welcome to the future." I left without the medicine, without the money, without raising my voice. Outside, the heat had begun to break. A late summer breeze rustled the trees along Silver Lane, my old neighborhood, my old skin. I walked home slowly, the receipt folded in my palm like a useless bandage. On my porch, I sat down, shoes still on, and looked out at the street. We used to run an apothecary, my husband and I. Not a pharmacy, an apothecary. People came for remedies, advice, tea, and we listened. Harold kept handwritten notes on customers' preferences. I knew who was allergic to penicillin before their own doctors did. When Harold died, I closed the store myself. No one deserved to inherit that kind of love as a burden. I thought I had let it go. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked too loudly. My tea had gone cold. I sat at the table and read the receipt again. $213.49, auto-debited. Then I opened my bank app. Cleared. No refunds pending. No pending shipments. The money was theirs. The pills were not mine. When did it start being acceptable to laugh at someone for aging? When did it become funny to deny help and call it policy? I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was aware. Aware of how quietly the world writes you off once you stop being useful. Once you're no longer someone's mother, someone's employee, someone's sale. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of rage. I just kept seeing that bag with my name on it behind the counter, like it was mocking me. In the morning, I got a call from Dolores across the street. "You went to Maple Pharmacy yesterday, didn't you?" she asked. "Yes." "They did the same to me, charged me for insulin, told me it was backlogged. When I came back, they said it expired, said I should be more careful next time. I told them they were the ones who gave me the date." "You get your money back?" "Not a dime." I was quiet for a moment. "Who owns the place now?" Dolores hesitated. "I think it's that Roy kid. You remember Roy, don't you? Used to work deliveries for Harold back in the day. always smelled like peppermint gum. I did remember, and I remembered something else. Roy had leased that space from Harold's estate after the store closed, with a special clause, a clause I had agreed to. My name was still on that paperwork, at least the last time I checked. I thanked Dolores and hung up. Then I went to the hall closet, pulled down the box with the rubber band around it, financial documents, contracts, old statements. It had been years since I touched any of it, but I remembered where the folder was. Roy Holloway, lease agreement, dated 2009. And something else, a clause in the contract. In the event of sale, default, or violation of agreed community service standards, the original leaseholder, that was me, retained the right to reclaim the property for nonprofit purposes, pending legal confirmation. It was all right there. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not out of pettiness, not out of revenge, out of remembering who I used to be and realizing I still was. I hadn't thought about that lease in years. It had always seemed like a formality, something Harold insisted on adding just in case things go sideways. I remember laughing when he said it. You think someone's going to mess with a widow in her 70s? He had looked at me then, very still, very sure. I think they'll count on it. By noon that day, I was at the county registrar's office, appointment or not. The woman behind the counter, Erica, according to her name tag, was polite but hesitant. You're looking for what exactly, ma'am? The current ownership and lease status of 812 Silver Lane. She tilted her head. That's the pharmacy? Yes. She typed for a moment, then nodded slowly. Owned by Holloway Holdings LLC, transferred in 2019, lease agreement originated in 2009. Do you have standing in the matter? I handed her the folder. Her eyes widened a little when she saw the signatures. I'm the original leaseholder, I said, with Clause 12B invoked in case of violation. Erica took the documents to a supervisor. I waited in a plastic chair, watching an old man argue softly with a vending machine. I remembered him. He used to work maintenance at the library. Now, even his dollar bill didn't want to be taken seriously. 10 minutes later, a man in a suit came out with the folder in hand. Ms. Danvers, he said, you may want to consult with a property attorney, but yes, the clause is legally binding. If the current occupant is found in breach of agreed community standards, you could initiate repossession proceedings. What defines a breach? That's where the lawyer comes in. I see. But I will say this. He lowered his voice. There's been talk, complaints, especially from seniors. If you were to file something, I don't think it would be dismissed outright. I thanked him and left. The sun was too bright outside, as if the day didn't yet know what it was about to become. On my walk home, I stopped by the small bakery next to the bus stop. Margaret was still there, powdered sugar on her sleeves, hair pulled up in the same red clip she wore 20 years ago. Martha, she said, lighting up, haven't seen you in ages. I've been around. She looked at my face for a second too long. What happened? I told her, quietly. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she slid a muffin across the counter. On the house, she said. We all know what that pharmacy's become. Nobody says anything because everyone thinks nobody else will. Not anymore, I said. I didn't eat the muffin. I held it in my hand like an offering to the version of myself that used to believe people would simply do what's right. At home, I called Walter Pennington. We hadn't spoken since Harold's funeral. He'd been our family's lawyer, a mild man with a spine of steel. He used to drink too much coffee and never once miss a deadline. Walter, I said, I need a meeting. That afternoon, I took the bus to his office. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. Walter came out of his office personally and gave me a gentle smile. Martha Danvers, my God, sit, please. I laid the folder on his desk. He took one look at it and whistled low. You're dusting off the old claws. I'm not trying to destroy anyone, Walter, but I won't be humiliated in my own town by a boy I used to hand lemon drops to behind my husband's counter. Walter nodded. Let me read it over. You want tea? No, I want action. He smiled. Still a Danvers. We spent the next 2 hours going through the lease. He pulled up additional filings, zoning laws, business licenses, and complaints. Yes, there were several. Overcharged insurance claims, delayed shipments, denied refunds, and more than one accusation of discrimination. By the end of the meeting, Walter sat back and folded his hands. If we push this, you'll likely get the property back, but it won't be quiet. Are you ready for that? I looked him in the eye. Do you remember the fire in '88? He blinked. Of course. You remember how I kept the store running out of our garage for 6 weeks? Yes. Then don't ask me if I'm ready. Walter nodded. All right. I'll draft a preliminary claim. We'll file it by Friday. And I'll reach out to the regulatory board about the pharmacy license. If he's mistreating patients, that's a separate violation. I walked home slowly, not from fatigue, but from weight, of history, of choices, of a life that hadn't always been this lonely. When I got back, I sat in the old rocking chair on the porch. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees. A young girl rode her bicycle past my house and waved. I waved back. Then I opened the muffin. I chewed slowly, thoughtfully, and for the first time in years, it didn't taste like a memory. Walter didn't waste time. By Friday morning, I had a neat packet delivered to my door. A copy of the preliminary claim, the formal notice of intended repossession, and a letterhead-ready draft to send to the State Pharmacy Board. His note was handwritten in the margin. Still got it, Martha. I placed the packet on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. I wasn't hesitating. I was remembering. The first time Roy Holloway stepped into our apothecary, he was 16. Nervous, slouched. His mother had sent him in with a prescription and a note that said, "He's trying. Please give him something to do." Harold took one look at the kid and put him behind the delivery counter that same afternoon. He needs routine, Harold had said, not rescue. And Roy, he bloomed for a while, learned quickly, learned respectfully. When Harold passed and I was forced to close the shop, it was Roy who asked about leasing the space. I said yes, not because I believed in his business plan, but because I believed in who he had once been. Now I believed in documentation. The next day, I went to the bank. I hadn't been inside that building in months, but the manager still remembered me. He stood up when I walked in. "Ms. Danvers, is everything all right? I need to check on a transfer from 2019, a business property." He pulled up the records and printed what I asked for. I saw Roy's signature again, shaky, too eager. I saw the payment schedule, the delays, the partial corrections, and I saw one entry from 2 years ago marked renegotiated, community terms voided by mutual consent. Only it wasn't my signature on that page. It was forged. I stood for a long time staring at that sheet of paper. Then I slid it back across the desk. "Can I get a notarized copy of this, please?" The manager's face changed. "Yes, of course, right away." Outside, I sat on the bench next to the bronze plaque honoring Harold's service to the town. 27 years, read the inscription. I touched the edge of the metal. My fingertips came away dusty. A girl walked by with a to-go coffee and headphones. She looked at me, didn't smile, didn't nod, just passed. I wondered what I must have looked like to her, a frail woman with a folder on her lap, sitting still in a town that no longer had use for her. Let her wonder. That evening, I called the municipal board, left a message, followed up with an email, attached the notarized copy of the forged document. It was, as Walter would say, no longer a matter of personal offense but of public interest. And then I waited. By Sunday morning, I got a call. A city clerk named Shannon. Bright voice, tight tone. "Ms. Danvers, we've received your documentation. I'm afraid we need to verify. I'll be at your office Monday. Bring your legal advisor." There was a pause. "Yes, ma'am." I spent Sunday cleaning. Not out of nervousness, out of rhythm. I hadn't dusted the bookshelves in months, hadn't rearranged the linen drawer. It felt good to make order of things I could control. The things inside the house were still mine. Late afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Carol, from 2 streets over. She held a grocery bag with both hands, like it might spill at any moment. "Hope you don't mind," she said. "I made stew and thought, well, you probably don't cook much these days." I took the bag. "I cook just fine." She looked embarrassed. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." I stepped aside. "Come in." We ate in the kitchen. I didn't say much. Carol did enough talking for 2. Told me about her son's divorce, her knee replacement, how the new library hours were a disgrace. When the conversation circled back to the pharmacy, I simply said, "I'm handling it." Carol stared at me. "You're suing them?" "Not exactly." "You're not going to make a scene, are you?" I looked at her. "Carol, I am the scene." She didn't understand. That was fine. After she left, I put the dishes away, folded the grocery bag neatly, and set it by the door. Tomorrow would be paperwork, but the day after that, if Walter was right, might be something else entirely. At 8 that evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. "Yes?" Silence. Then, "Ms. Danvers, it's Roy." His voice had changed. Lower, with a careful edge to it. I waited. "I heard you filed something. I just wanted to say if there's been a misunderstanding, I'm happy to sit down and talk." I let the silence stretch. "We used to be close," he added. "Yes," I said. "You were 16. You didn't insult strangers then." I didn't know what was going on. My staff, look, I'm not saying they were right. I'm just saying, don't ruin my life over one bad day. I smiled into the phone. "Oh, Roy, this isn't about your bad day." Then I hung up. The municipal building on Main Street hadn't changed in 50 years. The carpet still smelled like sun-heated paper, and the chairs still groaned under every shift of weight. I arrived 10 minutes early. Shannon, the city clerk, was already waiting. She wore a dark blouse and had a clipboard pressed flat against her chest like a shield. "Ms. Danvers, thank you for coming. I don't like doing things over the phone." "I understand." We walked to a side office. A young man with a tie too tight around his throat stood when I entered. "This is Mr. Vaughn from legal." He extended a hand. "Ma'am." They offered me a seat. I didn't take it. "I brought originals," I said, placing the folder on the table. Shannon opened it, flipping through the lease, the payment schedule, the notarized forged page. Vaughn leaned over her shoulder, murmured something. She nodded. "This clause, 12B, she said. "We've never actually had it invoked. Doesn't mean it's invalid." "No, ma'am." She flipped further. Do you have any supporting documentation regarding the pharmacy's behavior? We've received general complaints, but nothing filed formally. I have sworn statements from 2 neighbors who were denied paid prescriptions and insulted in the process. I also have a contact at the local paper who's gathering testimony for a potential story. Mr. Vaughn spoke up. This could become public? I imagine it will. He leaned back in his chair. Shannon looked at me for a long moment. And your desired outcome? Reinstatement of property control, revocation of Roy Holloway's operating rights within city limits, and the transfer of the premises to a municipal-run senior dispensary at cost, no profit. Vaughn blinked. You want to give it to the city? I want it to serve who it was always meant to serve. They didn't argue. There wasn't much they could say. When I left the office, the receptionist gave me a quiet nod. Not respect, maybe, but recognition. I'd take that. The following morning, I returned to Walter's office. He had already heard from Shannon. You made an impression, he said. She asked the right questions. Walter poured coffee, handed me a mug. The city's reviewing your documentation. But off the record, Vaughn told me the forgery is enough. You've got momentum. I sat back. Then let's keep it going. Walter hesitated. They might offer a compromise. Roy gives up management rights, but keeps ownership. No. I had a feeling you'd say that. He passed me another document. This is the formal request for a temporary injunction. It freezes all transactions on the property until the matter is resolved, including any lease transfers or sales. I signed. That afternoon, I walked down Silver Lane. I didn't need anything from the bakery or the hardware store. I just wanted to see it all, the town, the routes, the sidewalks. Harold and I once swept together every Sunday morning when we opened the store. Near the pharmacy, I slowed. It looked the same. Sterile, bright, cold. A woman stepped out just then, holding a bag and shaking her head. She muttered something under her breath. Her husband followed behind her. I told you, he said. They don't give a damn. I let them pass. Inside, I saw Roy at the counter. He hadn't noticed me yet. His mouth moved. Something smug to his employee, no doubt. Then he looked up. Our eyes met, and I saw it. The flicker. The realization. He knew what was coming. He knew I hadn't backed down. I didn't go in. I just turned and kept walking. By evening, the local paper had reached out. A reporter named Amanda. Mid-30s. Polite. Slightly rehearsed. Ms. Danvers, she said on the phone, I've been hearing some buzz. Would you be willing to talk? If I did, I'd speak clearly, not with vengeance, just facts. That's all I need. She came to my house the next morning. We sat on the porch. I gave her the full story. I didn't dramatize. I didn't soften. I just told the truth. At one point, she asked, why not let it go? Why not just walk away? I looked at her. Because we've taught people that silence is grace, that being older means being quiet. But sometimes grace is knowing when not to look away. She didn't write that part down, but I saw it land. Before she left, she said, you remind me of my grandmother. Let's hope that's a compliment. Oh, it is. I watched her walk to her car. Then I went inside and called Walter again. Ready for part 2? I asked. He laughed. Always. By Monday morning, the article was out. It wasn't sensational. No all-caps headlines, no exclamation marks. Just a quiet column in the center of page 3. Former apothecary owner takes legal action against local pharmacy. Amanda had written it cleanly, fairly. She named no names, but everyone in town could read between the lines. I read it once, then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. A knock at the door came just after noon. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find Dolores standing there with a Tupperware container in her hands. "Chicken salad," she said, holding it out. "I didn't ask for—" "I know, but I read the article and I thought, well, you shouldn't have to make lunch today." I took the container. "Thank you." She didn't leave, just stood there, hesitating. "I don't know how you found the nerve, Martha. I think about all the times I should have said something, at the pharmacy, at the post office, even at the clinic. But I just—" "You didn't want to cause trouble." She nodded, ashamed. "I didn't either," I said, "until trouble found me." That afternoon, I received a formal letter from the city. The injunction had been approved. Roy could no longer make changes to the property, take out loans, or conduct major business operations on site. Walter called me not long after. "It started," he said. "Will it hold?" "For now. But Roy will push back. Expect noise." I didn't mind noise. I'd lived through a war, a house fire, and the death of a man I loved more than breath. I could survive Roy Holloway's temper. Sure enough, that evening, my phone rang again. This time, he didn't bother hiding the number. "Are you enjoying this?" he asked, voice tight. "No." "Because it sure feels like a personal attack." "Is the forged document not personal?" He didn't answer. I continued. "You stood in the same store my husband built from the ground up, and you let people humiliate his customers, my neighbors, my friends. Then you signed my name without permission. You don't get to claim the victim now, Roy." There was a long pause. "You're destroying everything I built." "You didn't build it," I said. "You inherited it, and you've wasted every inch." He hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. The next morning, I took a walk through the neighborhood. A few people nodded at me. One man stopped and shook my hand, just said, "Good for you," and kept walking. Outside the corner diner, I saw Amanda sipping coffee through a straw, typing on her phone. She looked up and waved me over. "Got 5 more emails since the article went up," she said. "People sharing their own stories. You plan to publish them?" "Depends. Some are ready to go public. Others are just venting." "Venting's a start." She paused. "How are you feeling?" "Solid." I didn't stay long. I never liked lingering for attention. On my way home, I stopped in front of the old apothecary again. The windows were dark. "Closed for inventory," said the taped sign. Inventory, I thought. Or hiding. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a woman sitting on the curb. Mid-50s, maybe. Nicely dressed, eyes red. She had a pharmacy bag clutched in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. "Are you all right?" I asked. She looked up, startled. "I'm fine. Just can't believe how I was treated in there." I nodded. Sat down beside her, knees protesting. "They said my insurance had lapsed," she continued, "which I knew wasn't true. And when I asked them to check again, the woman just said, 'We're not a charity.'" "Did you get what you needed?" "Barely. Had to pay out of pocket. $63. "Keep the receipt." She glanced at me. "You're the woman from the paper, aren't you?" "I am." She stared at her water bottle. "You're doing something good." "No," I said. "I'm doing something necessary." She nodded slowly. When I stood to leave, she looked up again. "What happens next?" I smiled. "We'll see." It wasn't about revenge. I reminded myself of that each time I caught a glimpse of my name in the paper or overheard murmured conversations at the bakery. This wasn't about getting back. It was about setting things back where they belonged. But people always need their drama, especially in a small town where routine holds more power than any mayor. By Wednesday, someone had posted a photo of me outside the pharmacy, sitting on the curb with that woman and her water bottle. No caption, just an image of two women in quiet conversation. The comments underneath were mixed. Good for her. Some folks can't let go of the past. Don't know why she's stirring up trouble. Finally, someone's standing up to that place. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Let the town talk. That's what towns do. Walter came by later that afternoon, unannounced. He knocked once, then opened the screen door like he always had. "I hope you have coffee," he said, holding a manila envelope. "You know where the cups are." We sat at the kitchen table. He passed the envelope to me without speaking. Inside, a printed email chain between the city licensing department and the pharmacy board. The investigation had begun, quietly, discreetly, but officially. "They're starting with the forged document," Walter said. "That alone is enough to suspend Roy's license, even if only temporarily." I looked up from the papers. "He'll try to blame someone else. Already is. Says a temp filed it. Claims he didn't notice." "Doesn't matter," I said. "His name is on it. He filed it." Walter sipped his coffee. "It won't be immediate. Bureaucracy never is. But they're watching now." "I can wait," I said. Walter leaned back. "That's the difference between you and most people, Martha. You don't rush. You don't scream. You just move like weather." "I'm old," I said. "Not impatient." We sat for a while in silence. Then he asked, "You thought about what you'll do with the property if it comes back to you?" "Yes." "And?" "I want it turned into something useful, something lasting." "Any specifics?" "Not yet," I said. "But I'll know when the time's right." He didn't press. After he left, I walked into the spare room at the back of the house, the one Harold used to call the storeroom. It still smelled faintly of liniment and cedar. I opened the tall cabinet against the wall. The old ledger books were still there. Faded blue covers, handwritten labels. Inside, lists of names, dates, prescriptions, prices. We never made people pay up front. Not always. Not if we knew them. Sometimes they paid a week later. Sometimes they brought eggs, or blankets, or nothing. We wrote it all down anyway. Never to shame, just to remember. I flipped to one page from 1983. Mrs. Knowles, camphor rub, owed $125. She paid in sweet potatoes the following Thursday. I closed the book and held it against my chest for a long time. That night, I didn't sleep. But not from restlessness. My mind was turning toward what I already knew. The next morning, I called the municipal board again. "Shannon," I said, "it's Martha Danvers." "Yes, ma'am, I want to formally propose a transition." "A transition?" "If the property comes back to me, I want it converted into a city-run dispensary. For seniors, low income. No markup." Silence. Then, "That's remarkable. It's overdue." "I'll note it," she said. "I'll add it to the motion." I hung up, and I didn't feel noble. I didn't feel powerful. I just felt calm. The first official notice came on a Thursday. A plain envelope slid through my mail slot with the city seal pressed in blue. Inside, a single-page letter from the Office of Business Regulation. The language was dry, but the meaning was clear. The license of Holloway Holdings LLC is suspended pending further review. It wasn't final, but it was a beginning. I read it twice, then folded it and placed it under the sugar bowl on my kitchen table. I didn't need to frame it. It wasn't a trophy. I made myself tea, peeled a pear, and turned on the radio. Classical music hummed low in the background. I ate slowly, like someone who had no more to prove. By mid-afternoon, word had spread. I didn't need to ask. When I walked down to the mailbox, 3 cars slowed just a little as they passed. One woman honked once. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. At 4 o'clock, Walter called. "They're pulling out the old files," he said. "Complaints going back years. Dozens. Most were buried or unresolved. They're not buried anymore." I could hear it in his voice. Not excitement. Respect. Like he was watching something long overdue finally reach daylight. Later that evening, someone knocked. It was Roy. He stood on my porch in a crisp shirt, holding a gift bag, as if this were a misunderstanding and not a slow, deliberate disrespect that had grown roots. "Martha," he said. "Not Ms. Danvers. Not ma'am. I didn't invite him in. I just wanted to come personally. Apologize. This whole situation, it got out of hand." I waited. He held out the bag. "Chamomile tea. Thought it might help you sleep." I stared at it. "You think this is about sleep?" His hand wavered, then dropped. "I made mistakes. I admit that. But ruining my business over one bad interaction, is that all you think this is?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. "You forged a document," I said. "You charged people for medicine you refused to release. You insulted them to their faces. You didn't just make a mistake, Roy. You made a decision. Again and again." He shifted his weight. "Look, I'm trying here." "Trying what?" "To undo years in one visit." He looked down. I continued. "You could have called, written, made a real apology. Instead, you brought me tea. It's all I could think of. That's part of the problem." He left the bag on the porch and walked away. I didn't watch him go. That night, I brewed the chamomile, not out of forgiveness, but out of curiosity. It tasted like nothing. Friday morning, Shannon called. She sounded different. Tired, a little hoarse, like she'd been up late with paperwork or truth. "We're moving forward," she said. "The city's preparing to take temporary possession of the property while the investigation continues." What does temporary mean? 60 days. Could be more. But with your proposal on file, the council's interested. Good. She hesitated. "Ms. Danvers, you've started something. We're hearing from residents who've never filed complaints in their lives. They're lining up to give statements. It's powerful." "It's not about me," I said, "but it started with you." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. After we hung up, I sat in Harold's chair, the one by the window. I hadn't sat there in years. From that spot, I could see the pharmacy, across the park. Quiet now. No lights in the windows. Just a building waiting to remember what it was built for. The keys arrived in a sealed envelope delivered by courier. No note, no fanfare. Just 2 tarnished brass pieces on a metal ring and a folded letter from the city clerk's office confirming that temporary custodial access to 812 Silver Lane had been granted to me, pending final disposition. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I held the keys in my palm for a full minute, then placed them in a small ceramic bowl on the kitchen counter where Harold used to drop his every evening. The next morning, I walked down Silver Lane at sunrise. No one was out yet. The street was quiet, lined with the same oak trees that had dropped their leaves onto Harold's car every fall. The sidewalks were cracked in familiar places. The cracks had outlived most of the businesses. When I reached the building, I paused. The windows were streaked with dust, the blinds crooked. A notice from the licensing board was taped to the inside of the glass, printed in the kind of font that meant business. It didn't say closed forever, but it didn't have to. I unlocked the door. The smell hit me first. Chemical, stale, unnatural. The scent of cleaning products trying to hide something worse. The inside was cold. Too cold. As if the air conditioning had been left on just to keep the silence company. I walked past the front counter, past the empty shelving units, past the glossy posters of smiling models in white lab coats pretending to care. Behind the counter, I found the back office. It was cluttered, but not messy. Roy had kept it impersonal. A desk, a chair, a shelf of unopened mail. The computer was gone, likely swept away in his last hours, along with whatever records he didn't want left behind. But he hadn't taken the wall safe. The key still fit. Inside were old receipts, backup tapes, a jar of instant coffee, and 3 deposit envelopes marked, "Do not open." I left them where they were. It wasn't about catching him now. I wasn't here to punish. I was here to remember. I walked back into the front area and stood in the center of the floor. My shoes made no sound on the laminate tile. The overhead lights flickered slightly before humming to life. I could see it. The old apothecary. The rows of wooden shelves. The bell over the door. Harold in his white coat, always too short in the sleeves. Me at the desk, balancing the books with a pencil and paper. People didn't come to us just for pills. They came for understanding, for patience, for the kind of kindness you can't put on a chart. We never made much, but we never needed much. Dignity had always been payment enough. And now? Now it was time to give some of that back. I returned the next day with gloves, a bucket, and a broom. It was slow work. My knees protested, my fingers cramped. But the motions were familiar. Sweep, bend, wipe, straighten. By mid-afternoon, I had cleared enough to see the floor again. The windows sparkled. The counter gleamed. On day 3, Carol stopped by. She brought coffee and a skeptical frown. "I heard you've got the keys." "I do." "You're not really going to try to reopen this place, are you?" "Not the way it was." "What then?" "A place for seniors," I said, "to get what they need without being humiliated." Carol looked unconvinced. "Do you know how hard it is to run something like that?" "Yes." "Do you have volunteers, funding, staff?" "Not yet." "Then what do you have?" I looked around the empty space. Sunlight was pouring through the windows, catching in the clean glass. "I have a key." She blinked. "That's not enough." I smiled. "It's a start." She stayed longer than she meant to. Ended up sweeping the sidewalk while I wiped down the old signage. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. By the end of the week, 2 more women had stopped in. One offered folding chairs. Another brought boxes of expired bandages from her late husband's supply closet. I thanked them both. I didn't ask for help. They just came. And still, I didn't call it a reopening. Not yet. I called it remembering. By the end of the second week, people had stopped asking if I was serious. They started asking how they could help. A young man named Emmett, who lived 3 doors down, offered to repaint the front door. Said his grandfather used to bring him to the shop when he was little. "You always gave me peppermints," he said, "even when I pretended to cough." I handed him the old jar from the back shelf. "They're still good," I said. He laughed. "Even if they're not, it's the memory that counts. The city hadn't finalized anything yet. The building was still under review, technically, but no one came to stop me. And that, in its own way, was permission enough. I created a notebook, plain, spiral-bound, like we used in the old days. I called it Needs. Inside, I wrote down what people asked for: reading glasses, compression socks, saline spray. Nothing fancy. Just what the local pharmacy never seemed to have, or pretended not to. I kept the notebook on the front counter next to a tin of shortbread cookies. By the third day, the list had 3 pages of items and a dozen signatures. One woman wrote, "Just a place to sit while waiting for the bus would be nice." Another added, "A bathroom that doesn't lock automatically after 60 seconds. Basic things. Human things. Meanwhile, Roy had gone quiet. His lawyer had submitted a letter requesting reconsideration of the license suspension. The board declined to comment publicly, but Walter forwarded me the rejection notice. Insufficient remediation, unacknowledged violations, loss of community trust. They didn't say my name, but I was in every word. That night, I sat by the window in Harold's chair again. Outside, the streetlight flickered once, then steadied. I looked at the bowl on the kitchen counter, where the pharmacy keys still rested, not as proof, as promise. The next day, Shannon called. "The council met this morning," she said. "We're moving ahead." "With what?" "Your proposal. The city's drafting a resolution to assume full ownership of the property and designate it a nonprofit community dispensary. You'll be named the founding steward." I let the words settle. "And the legal process?" "Walter's team will oversee the transfer. We'll make it official at the next council meeting." "When is that?" "Next Wednesday." "Public?" "Yes." "Then I'll be there." Shannon hesitated. "Martha, there may be reporters." "I hope so." After we hung up, I walked back down to 812 Silver Lane. The new paint on the door was dry. The bell over the entrance, installed just that morning by Emmett, rang soft and clear when I opened it. The space was still mostly empty, but it was clean, warm, full of light. I sat at the counter and opened the Needs notebook again. A new entry had appeared. "Thank you for reminding us we matter." No signature. Didn't need one. The town council meetings were always held in the same building, the old courthouse with the clock that hadn't worked in over a decade. I arrived 15 minutes early, not to make a scene, just to be sure of my seat. The room was smaller than people imagined. 2 rows of folding chairs, a long oak table, and a podium that wobbled when someone leaned too hard. I'd stood at that podium once before, in 1982, when they tried to close the post office on the West End. I hadn't been nervous then. I wasn't nervous now. Shannon met me at the door, clipboard in hand. "You're on the agenda," she said. "Item 4? I'm not here to speak unless I have to. You might want to." I sat in the second row. The front row was already full. 2 realtors, a teacher, someone from the Parks Department. No one looked at me, but they all knew. When the meeting started, I folded my hands and listened. Item 1, a zoning request. Item 2, new sidewalk funding. Item 3, playground equipment grants. Then Shannon stood and cleared her throat. Item 4, motion to convert parcel 8112 Silver Lane into a municipally operated community dispensary, designated for senior and low-income residents. There was a pause, then murmuring. Then a man from the far side of the room stood up. I didn't know his name. Balding, blazer, a pen clipped to his collar. "Madam Clerk, is this the former Holloway Pharmacy?" "Yes," she said. "And the owner consented to this transfer?" "The city holds temporary custodial rights. Legal proceedings regarding permanent transfer are pending and documented. He frowned. Is the person responsible for the motion present? Shannon looked at me. I stood. I didn't go to the podium. I didn't need amplification. My name is Martha Danvers, I said. I'm 78 years old. I ran that building when it was a neighborhood apothecary. With my husband. With integrity. Silence. I watched it become a place where people were mocked for needing care, where prescriptions were paid for and withheld, where our most vulnerable neighbors were treated like burdens. Still silence. I'm not asking for punishment, I continued. I'm asking for restoration. That space was always meant to serve the community. Let it do that again. I sat down. Someone clapped. Just one person. Then another. Then the room was quiet again. The motion passed. Not unanimously, but firmly. Afterward, as people stood to leave, several stopped to shake my hand. Some didn't. That was fine. I wasn't here for applause. I was here to reclaim what had been taken from too many for too long. That night, I walked home alone. The streetlights glowed steady. The town was asleep. But I wasn't. Because something had shifted. It wasn't about the pharmacy anymore. Not really. It was about memory and place and dignity. By the following week, the sign above the door was gone. Not ripped down, not replaced. Just gone. Taken down by Emmett in the early hours, wrapped carefully in an old painter's cloth, and stored in the back room. It didn't belong here anymore, he said simply. In its place, we hadn't hung anything yet. I wasn't in a hurry to name what we were building. People needed the function before the title. Inside, the shelves were starting to fill. Slowly, awkwardly, thanks to quiet donations and a few anonymous boxes left at the doorstep. Reading glasses, travel-sized tissues, cough drops. One woman brought 6 pairs of wool socks with the tags still on. Bought them for my late husband, she said. He always hated cold feet. No one brought cash. That was the most beautiful part. People gave what they had in reach, things from cupboards, closets, old medicine cabinets. It wasn't about solving everything. It was about offering something. The city had provided a temporary stipend to cover utilities. We didn't need much more. We weren't selling. We weren't billing. We were remembering how to look each other in the eye. Every afternoon, I sat behind the counter with my needs notebook. People came in quietly, asked nothing of me personally, just browsed, nodded, sometimes left a slip of paper with a name or request. My aunt needs a knee brace. Is it okay to take expired acetaminophen? Do you know anyone who still has a working blood pressure cuff? I answered what I could, researched what I couldn't. And every evening, I closed the shop slowly, lights one by one, as if tucking it in. The town hadn't officially announced the conversion, but word had spread. Some called it the senior room. Others said Martha's place. I didn't correct them. Let the names come. Let them settle like dust on old counters. One afternoon, Amanda stopped by again, the reporter. She wore less makeup this time, carried no notebook, just a paper bag from the bakery. Peach tarts, she said. Still warm. You came to write another story? No, she said. I came to see if you were okay. I poured her tea. We sat on the same chairs Harold and I used to sit in after closing, wooden, stiff-backed, full of memory. You've done something rare, she said. I've done what needed doing. She looked around. This used to be a business, a transaction. Now it feels like a conversation. It was always a conversation, I said. Roy just stopped listening. Amanda didn't argue. She pulled a folded note from her coat pocket and slid it across the counter. "What's this?" "A letter. From a woman whose mother died last year. She read your article. Said her mother had once cried in this place. Because of how they treated her." I unfolded the note and read the shaky handwriting. "Thank you for giving that space back its soul." I didn't say anything. Not because I couldn't, but because there are moments that don't need to be spoken through. After Amanda left, I locked up early and sat on the bench outside. The wind had shifted. Summer was fading into fall. The trees along Silver Lane had begun their slow surrender. A woman walked past with a cane and nodded to me. Another followed, guiding her grandson on a scooter. I watched them go, remembering that we don't age into silence. We age into clarity. And if we're lucky, into usefulness again. By the third week, the shelves didn't look bare anymore. They weren't full either. But something about the way the items sat, neatly labeled, clearly arranged, made the space feel deliberate. Nothing in excess, nothing wasted. Everything with a purpose. People started coming not just for supplies, but to sit. We set up 2 folding chairs near the window. Someone brought in a small bookshelf, half filled with large print novels. A retired nurse stopped by and offered to take blood pressure readings on Tuesdays. I didn't organize any of it. I just unlocked the door in the morning and made sure the light was on. One day, a man named Clarence came in, mid-60s, still wearing his old work boots, even though he hadn't worked in a decade. He didn't speak at first, just stood near the shelf of knee braces and stared. When I asked if he needed help, he said, "I came here 6 months ago, before all this. They told me I didn't qualify for the program discount. Said I should try Medicaid. I told them I already had." They laughed. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. I left without what I needed. Drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other bracing my knee. He finally reached for one of the braces, read the size, held it up. "You think I can take this? It's why it's there." He nodded slowly. "I'll bring something back." "You don't have to." "I want to." He left with the brace in one hand and his head a little higher than when he came in. That was how it worked now. No receipts, no lectures. Just trust. Walter stopped by that afternoon with a brown envelope under his arm. He looked more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. "The judge signed the final order," he said, handing it to me. "Full transfer of ownership. The city now holds title. You're listed as founding steward with indefinite tenure, unless revoked by municipal vote." I opened the envelope and looked at the papers inside. My name was printed in clean, bold type. "You don't have to stay involved forever," Walter said, taking a seat. "You've already done more than anyone could have asked." "I'm not tired yet," I said. "I didn't say you were." We sat for a while without speaking. Then he asked, "You heard about Roy?" I hadn't, but I didn't ask. Walter told me anyway. He tried to open a new location, 2 towns over. State licensing board denied his application. Too many unresolved complaints. He's threatening to sue, but his attorney withdrew. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, "That's between him and his reflection." Walter chuckled. "That's a good line." "It's not a line," I said. "It's a fact." After he left, I sat with the paperwork in my lap. I ran my fingers over the raised seal at the bottom. Not pride, not satisfaction, something quieter, like standing in your own home and finally noticing the silence isn't heavy anymore, just real. The official ribbon cutting was scheduled for the 2nd Tuesday in October. I didn't ask for it. The city arranged it, complete with a modest press release, a folding table with cookies, and a pair of gold-handled scissors someone borrowed from the library display case. I arrived early, as always. Emmett had set up a few folding chairs. Carol brought coffee in 2 thermoses. Shannon showed up in a wool coat that was too warm for the weather. But I didn't say anything. People trickled in. No speeches, no fanfare, just neighbors. Amanda was there too, though she didn't carry a notebook this time. Just a camera hanging loosely at her side. "Want me to take a photo?" she asked quietly. "If you must," I said. She took one, then didn't ask for another. At 10 o'clock, Shannon stepped up to the front and cleared her throat. "This is the kind of thing government rarely gets to do," she said. "Restore something. Not build over it, not privatize it, not forget it, but restore it." She turned to me. "On behalf of the town, we thank you, Ms. Danvers." People clapped, not loud, not rehearsed, just enough. They asked me to cut the ribbon, so I did. The scissors were too big, the ribbon too stiff, but I managed. And just like that, the place was open. Again. Afterward, people wandered inside, touched the shelves, picked up reading glasses, boxes of tissues, small tins of balm. No one asked what the rules were. They already knew. Clarence came by in his Sunday shoes and brought a bag of unopened multivitamins. "Too strong for me," he said. "Might be just right for someone else." A woman I didn't recognize placed 2 handmade scarves in the donation bin and left without saying a word. Even Roy's mother came by, though she didn't stay long. She stood in the doorway, nodded at me once, and walked away. I didn't stop her. I knew what that nod meant. By late afternoon, the crowd had thinned. I stood behind the counter, not to manage anything, just to see. That's when I saw her. A young woman, maybe early 30s, with a child on her hip. She looked around carefully, like she wasn't sure if she belonged. I offered a small nod, and she stepped forward. "My grandmother used to come here," she said. "Back when it was the old shop." "I remember," I said. "She always said you treated her like she was the only one in the room." She probably was, most days. She smiled. "She died last year." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She placed a small box on the counter. "I don't have much, but..." These were hers, mostly unopened. Inside were unopened glucose test strips, lotion, a thermometer still in its case. "They belong here," she said. I reached across and touched her hand. "So do you." She stood a moment longer, then turned and left with her child, who waved at me over her shoulder. I stood there until the door closed behind them, and the room went quiet again. That evening, I locked up slowly, the gold-handled scissors still resting on the counter. I didn't take them home. They didn't belong to me. The space was still not perfect. We had no signage, no funding to speak of, no official operating hours. And still, the people came. Because this wasn't a service. It was a signal that someone still noticed, that someone still cared, that the story wasn't over yet. By the time November came, we had heat. Not from the old system, Roy had let that fall into disrepair, but from 2 space heaters donated by a retired contractor who refused to give his name. One was dented, the other clicked when it ran. But they worked. We moved the chairs closer together. People came in with heavier coats, slower steps. One man brought in a small box of hearing aid batteries. "My father left them," he said. "No one in the family uses that brand anymore." Another dropped off a basket of soft gloves, all mismatched. "People lose one more often than both," she told me, and I found myself nodding. We didn't count what came in. We didn't track what went out. This place wasn't about numbers. It was about weathering. One rainy afternoon, Carol stayed late after helping organize the bandages. She stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the drizzle run down the glass. "I used to think old people just wanted to be left alone," she said. "But now I think maybe we just wanted to be asked first." She didn't wait for a response. She just picked up her purse and left. But the sentence stayed in the air long after she was gone. That weekend, I found a letter slipped under the door. It wasn't addressed, wasn't signed. Just folded notebook paper with careful handwriting. "I came in for toothpaste but found something else. Thank you for making space for people like me. I didn't know I still had a place to stand." I pinned it to the corkboard above the counter. Didn't frame it. Didn't hide it. Some truths are better left visible. Later that week, Walter returned with updated papers for my records, just in case anything changed. "I like things to be clean," he said. "Clean and simple." He lingered longer than usual. Sipped his tea slowly. "You could have walked away from all this," he said. "You had every right to live quietly." "I am living quietly," I said. "Just not invisibly." He smiled. "Fair distinction." Before leaving, he added, "You know the town's planning a dedication? Naming the building after you." I shook my head. "Tell them no." "Why not?" "Because it was never about me. It was about what happens when someone stops pretending not to see." He didn't press, and that was why I trusted him. As Thanksgiving approached, people brought more food than medicine. Cans of soup, boxes of crackers, jars of preserves. We cleared a corner shelf and called it the pantry. No labels, no limits. One woman came in, took a jar of peanut butter, and cried. I didn't ask why. I just walked her to the door. In the final week of November, we got our first heater failure. The older one gave out with a loud pop and a faint smell of melted plastic. Emmett came by the next day with a newer model. "I was going to sell this," he said, "but I figure you'll put it to better use." He didn't stay for tea, just installed it, gave me a nod, and left without waiting for thanks. That was how people gave now. Not for recognition, just to join something unspoken. December came in without apology. No slow buildup, no gentle shift. Just cold mornings, gray skies, and the kind of wind that makes you walk faster without realizing. We added another rug to the floor, moved the chairs even closer, set out a tin of cocoa that someone left on the doorstep with a note. For the ones who come early and stay a while. I started opening the place 15 minutes ahead of schedule. No one asked me to. It just felt right. The days grew shorter, but the visits grew longer. People didn't come just to get something. They came to be near it. Whatever it was, a center of gravity maybe, or just a place where nobody asked what you used to be before life got small. On a Tuesday near the middle of the month, I found a plastic bag hanging from the door handle. Inside were 3 packages of adult diapers, a deck of playing cards, and a stack of handwritten notes. Each one said something different. "I used to come here for my wife's pain medicine. My son lives in another state. He sends money, but this feels more like help. This place made me stop dreading Tuesdays." I read everyone. Then burned the duplicates for warmth in the metal tray out back. Not out of disrespect, but because some offerings are meant to vanish with grace. Walter came by the week before Christmas. He didn't bring papers this time, just himself. He looked tired, but content, like a man who had been carrying something heavy for years and finally handed it off without anyone noticing. "Do you know how rare this is?" he asked, sipping from the chipped mug he always used. "What?" A thing that begins because someone was humiliated and ends up healing everyone else. I shook my head. It's not ending. No, he said. I suppose not. That afternoon, we lit a candle in the front window. No holiday decoration, no wreath. Just one small light in a simple glass jar. People noticed. They didn't ask why it was there, but they stayed a little longer in the warmth. New Year's came with rain, not snow. The space heaters buzzed like old friends. Carol brought bread pudding in a casserole dish. Amanda stopped by with envelopes full of printed testimonials she hadn't had space to publish. Emmett fixed the hinge on the front door. And I, for once, let them do these things without insisting they didn't have to. That was the hardest part to learn. Acceptance without deflection. Grace without apology. On the second Thursday of January, a woman I didn't recognize came in just before closing. She wore a coat 2 sizes too big and walked with a stiffness I understood all too well. I don't need anything, she said. I just wanted to see. See what? If it was real, it is. She looked around the room, took in the shelves, the heater, the corkboard with the letters, the tin of shortbread, the old ledger notebook that now held names and requests in 3 different languages. Feels like a church, she said. No preaching here. No, but still, it feels holy. She didn't stay long, didn't leave anything, didn't take anything, but she smiled at the door. Sometimes, that's enough. Now I sit here, writing this, not because I need anyone to know my name, but because maybe, somewhere, someone is wondering if it's too late. Too late to fix what's broken. Too late to speak up. Too late to be useful again. It isn't. And if you're reading this, if any part of you felt seen or warmed or steadied by what happened on this small street in a town no one writes songs about, then do one thing. Pass it on. Not the story. The gesture. The steadiness. The refusal to look away. You don't need a building. You just need a chair, a window, and the willingness to leave the light on. Someone will come in. And when they do, don't ask what they need. Just let them belong.